Hello, welcome. It's time to stop hating your body. Thought it would be a good idea today to do a self-love reset. We're going to go through all of the things that have helped me in the past year change my relationship with my body. I look very different to how I did a few years ago, and I've kind of struggled to accept that. I've worked on that a lot using the things we're going to talk about, and I now feel a sense of peace and acceptance with the way that I look and the way that I have changed. My goal with this is to transfer that peace and acceptance to you so that you can feel the same way and at least start building that foundation of acceptance and self-love. Let's do a self-love reset. The thing I want to start with is that you are more than your appearance. This can feel quite trite. You may instantly roll your eyes or be instantly fighting against me saying that because you're like, appearance is still important, and it is, unfortunately. Fortunately or unfortunately, I'm wearing jewelry. I do enjoy caring about my appearance, but only at certain times, right? There are times where I wish that I didn't have to think about the way I looked at all, because to me it's just not as interesting. I'd prefer to be focusing on the way I feel and the connection I have with other people than to be so focused on my appearance. So trust me, I get it. If you're sitting there being like, okay, you are more than your appearance, fine, yeah, I get it. You can be unhappy with the way that you look, but really the most important thing is the way people feel when they're around you, your energy, and it's quite hard to both carry that light, joyful energy within yourself when you're hating yourself, but it's also difficult for other people to see that as well, to see that light, joyful energy that you bring when you're stuck in your head or stuck thinking really critical things about yourself. We will address those things. It's the saying about people will forget what you said or did, but never how you made them feel. And it's really easy to get caught up in the way that we look, especially if our body has changed, and to be so focused on it. But if you just show up to an event or show up, to a lunch or dinner or wherever, and you're just there and you're connecting with the people that you're with, that's what people are going to remember. They may register, oh, you look different, but things will move on very quickly. It's the spotlight effect of thinking that everyone is looking at us or everyone is paying attention to what we're doing. And obviously sometimes that is true, right? If it's your wedding, then yeah, probably a lot of people are looking at you. But in day-to-day life, we carry around this spotlight and we think, oh my gosh, they're going to notice my makeup doesn't look as nice today, or I don't look as put together, or, I look different from the last time they saw me. Maybe they notice those things, but it's not going to have the same impact that we think it does. I might think, oh my gosh, they're going to judge me, or they're going to think all these negative things about me. But really, they're probably just going to register that and be like, oh, okay, they're just happy to see you. And it's really hard because we want to care about our appearance and we want to look a certain way. The beauty standard comes into it of why don't I look like this? I wish I looked like her. Constant comparisons. It is difficult, but I want you to carry this truth around that you are more than your appearance. You don't need to hate yourself. One way that has helped me realize this is to acknowledge that my body does so much for me, and on different days different things will help. So with this, if something I'm saying isn't resonating, disregard it. Take what is useful and move on. This isn't an all or nothing thing. On different days different things work for me. That's okay. You don't have to be consistent with why or the underlying feelings. Just use whatever is useful. Lots of days it does help me to remember that my body does so much for me, and part of this is because I'm in recovery from addiction, and I remember how awful I used to feel when I was drinking every day and when I was trapped in that vicious cycle. I felt terrible and I was essentially poisoning myself every day and I couldn't stop. That helps me now to appreciate everything my body does and to be wow, it really is just trying to keep me alive. And I was trying so hard to do the opposite. Sometimes thinking about what your body actually does, it freaks me out a bit in terms of my heart beating on its own. But your body, your brain is designed to keep you alive. There are so many things that are happening that you don't even realize. You may be consciously doing different breathing exercises or meditating. So you may be I'm controlling my breathing, but you're not controlling consciously your breathing when you sleep, are you? Your body is doing so much for you. And if you have a cycle as well, there is so much happening in the background that you're not controlling, but your body is constantly working. There's constantly things happening, and just having appreciation for that and be oh yes, I am working really hard even at rest. So many different systems are working. And if you're interested in science or biology, then maybe you could go into all of this and really get into the nitty-gritty of what each of these systems does and grow your appreciation of it. Just anything that's going to help you feel positively about your body is really going to help with this self-love reset. The mindset shift of this. So we talked there about the physical things of what your body does for you, but detaching from productivity I think is a really helpful thing to do here in terms of not hating yourself, not hating your body, building like self-love within yourself. Detaching your value from productivity is really important, especially because we live in a capitalist system where so much of the time we are told that our value is what we do or what we produce, particularly like what we produce at work, what we produce for the economy, that we always have to be doing in order to be valuable. But that's not true. Just being is valuable. Even if you do nothing, you're still inherently valuable and inherently worthy. And this is something to work on. I mean, all of this stuff is something to work on, but like this might bring up a lot of resistance, because if you are someone who takes a lot of pride in your achievements at work or in what you do, that is something that you can still find pride in and be like, I'm so proud of myself for achieving this. I worked hard at this thing. But that works for you on the good days when you're able to achieve things. But on those days where you're not able to get things done, maybe then you feel bad about yourself. It's helpful if you can try and get to a place where you can celebrate all the things that you do. But equally, if you have a day where you do nothing because your mental health is bad or because you're just feeling really tired, you're feeling like isolated and alone, if you can get to a place where, yes, you can celebrate the good things, but you also feel sort of indifferent about not doing anything, that is a good place to start. And then eventually you can get to a point where you're like, actually, it really doesn't matter if I do nothing today. Like, I'm still valuable, I'm still worthy. This idea of like focusing on being rather than doing is important, because I found myself falling into the trap previously of thinking I'm allowed to accept my body, but only if I'm trying to change it. So that's still being in that state of doing. Instead of just being like, I accept you as you are, that acceptance is conditional. It's like, I accept you as you are only because I'm changing. Like, I accept myself only because I know that I'm going to do this. I accept myself if I am able to lose fat, build muscle, lose weight. I accept myself if I change. And that's still that state of doing. So this is why I'm emphasizing like detaching from productivity and focus more on being. I hope I've demonstrated the link, but you might be like, why are you talking about like capitalism when you're talking about self-love? It's because it's this mindset of like what you find value in. Are you valued by what you do or who you are? And now I've got to a place where I can value myself just through being. And it's not to do with I accept my body because I'm working on it and I'm going to be better. It's just no conditions, nothing attached. I just exist now as I am now. I accept that. I accept my body as I am now. And this is quite a radical thing, I found, because it's different to any kind of mindset I've had about myself before. I've always been like, oh yeah, I've gained weight, or my body has changed, but you know, I'm going to get back to what I used to look like, or I'm going to do something about this. Like, this isn't who I am. Both things can be true, right? We can want to make changes and make positive changes, but we can also be accepting of where we are now. And that acceptance is part of that just being. And detaching from any outcomes, any goals. Those are all great. Achievements are great. It's great to do things. It's great to have a focus and have goals and have things to go after. It gives you a sense of purpose, sense of meaning. It's great to be creative. It's great to like try different things. All for it, yes. But you don't have to attach your value to that. Try and focus more on being and not doing. And this links to the next point about self-love being radical in our society. Because our society, can you tell I'm talking about capitalism? Can you tell I've just read a book called Sedated, How Modern Capitalism Created Our Mental Health Crisis? Can you tell I've just read that book? I urge everyone to read it. I will leave a link to it because it is brilliant, so thought-provoking. Self-love is radical in our capitalist societies because lots of the time insecurities are manufactured to sell us things, because it's also a consumerist society. It is built on consumption, and so we need to be told new things to hate about ourselves to buy products that will fix those things. So in that context, self-love becomes radical because you're saying, I'm opting out of that. Like, you can't make me hate myself to then buy a product. Like, I'm just not going to do that. I'm going to rest in the acceptance, in the state of being that we just talked about, and focus instead on that. You step back out of the loop, or at least it gives you like a perspective on the system as opposed to just being within the system and like caught up in it. What's the thing about how many people have cellulite? Like, it's a very common thing and it's a normal thing, and yet we have created a problem out of that to sell people things. You know, you can get those like caffeine scrubs that supposedly like get rid of cellulite. Like, you either have it or you don't. It's not gonna go just because you buy a cream for it. Or like, I remember when people started talking about hip dips, and I was sort of quite offline at this point, and I'm like, what are people talking about? Like, what is that? That is just a made up thing. Like, what do you mean that people are feeling self-conscious about just the way their legs look or the way their hips look. It's all made up to sell you things. So accepting who you are, building self-love, that's a radical act under capitalism. And if you don't want to be like political about it, that stuff interests me. I'm quite stubborn and quite contrary, so I'm like, oh, you want me to be insecure? Too bad. Like, that's not going to happen. Now, because you want me to do that, I'm deliberately not going to do that. And in the end, it ends up working better because like it saves money, because I'm not like chasing a beauty ideal, and also it builds acceptance within myself, which is like the main thing. It's like, oh, I can tolerate myself. Not only that, like I actually like myself, like I can appreciate all of my good qualities. Like, this is actually amazing. There are some really interesting insights. I mentioned Sedated. I'm also reading The Beauty Myth. I finished Sedated, so I can say 1,000,000% that is a brilliant book, but I'm still reading The Beauty Myth. I can also confidently say it's brilliant, but I have not yet finished it, so I can't like give a full like review of it. It's talking about how women are often made to feel insecure and that these standards are constantly changing, as we know, because if you focus so much on that, it drains your energy, and then you're not going to be fighting for other things like equity. Some people are like, oh, but that's conspiratorial or whatever. I'm not saying it's done deliberately, but like if we're living not only in a capitalist society but under a patriarchy, there are going to be things that benefit inadvertently. Like, I'm not saying it's set up deliberately so that, oh, you're going to focus on your looks and you're not going to, you know, have the energy to fight for any political things or to fight for equality. It may not have been done deliberately, but because it benefits the patriarchal system, it's gonna like perpetuate itself. When women are obsessed over their looks and changing their bodies and changing everything about ourselves to fit a certain ideal of beauty, which is then going to change in like 10 years or whatever anyway, we have less energy to do more important things. And I've sort of found this, not even in a political way, but, you know, instead of focusing on like, oh my gosh, what am I going to eat, and like counting every thing that I'm eating and planning every meal obsessively, trying to make myself smaller, which again, what is that? Like, why do we want to take up less space? That consumes a lot of energy. And now I'm just like, oh, okay, I look this way. I want to focus more on like what I'm reading. So I just mentioned 2 books I'm reading, Sedated and The Beauty Myth. I want to focus more on my YouTube channel. I've been making more videos. I want to focus more on like writing, or on rewatching Lost, spending time with my family, going for walks. Like, I'd much rather spend my energy doing those things than looking in the mirror hating myself, or like acting in ways that are trying to change my body instead of just accepting it. Again, we can do both, and I can like use those nice walks to tone up my legs. Like, it's not one or the other, but it's just reframing how you're approaching things. Am I doing this activity to change my body, or is any potential change of my body, is that like a byproduct of doing the activity? So like if I suddenly find myself walking 10,000 steps a day, that's probably going to change the way my legs look, because I'm not used to walking that many steps a day. But I don't have to go on a walk solely because I want like my thighs to have more definition, or my legs to have more definition, or to have like a smaller waist. Like, I don't have to go for a walk for that purpose. That might be a byproduct of the walk, but really I'm going for the walk for my mental health, or because I like taking pretty pictures of the sky, or I want to listen to my podcast and I like, you know, movement. So I'm walking and listening to my podcast. Reframing these things. And I hope like some of the things I'm saying are prompting some introspection in you to help you reframe some of this stuff. Because it is big, and like we are talking about, it is radical. So it's not like going to happen all at once, but I'm just like planting some seeds, hopefully. Sorry, I had to redo my hair because I realised I was looking like an egg. Nothing wrong with looking like an egg, but that's not the look I was going for. I don't think this is the look I'm going for either. A practical thing you can do to start building some acceptance and self-love. This is something I found helpful. You could start making some lists. I love a list. So you could list all of your good qualities, things that you admire about yourself. List interactions that you're really proud of how you acted, or you're really surprised. Maybe you like put yourself in a challenging situation. You put yourself in this social situation that you're normally really uncomfortable with, and you actually are like really happy with how you behaved and how it went, and you were kind of like nervous beforehand, but you're like, oh my gosh, it went so well. Like, make a list of these things that you're like proud of achieving, of things that you like about yourself. You can list nice things that people have said about you, and this is not to be vain or to like validate yourself only through what other people have said. Again, pick what is most useful to you. If you don't think it's going to be helpful to think about things that people have said about you, you don't want to think about their opinions, that's fine. Like, go with that then. Don't make a list of that. But making these lists can be helpful because it can remind you of the good that you bring to the world and the good things about you outside of just what you look like. And if these lists are challenging to write, then that shows that you maybe have some work to do on this self-acceptance and self-love, and that is okay. Write down what you can, and maybe you can write down a few things and then come back to it the next day, things that you like about yourself, or have it in the back of your mind. You don't even have to write it down, or you could write it in your notes app on your phone. It's just about trying to see things differently about yourself. And as you start trying to build this new perspective, another key thing you could do is start by noticing and then challenging any negative thoughts or beliefs that you have about yourself. Now, this is like a big topic, clearly, like that's a big undertaking, but just start to like build awareness of how you talk to yourself. And you can ask yourself, when you're like beating yourself up and like your inner critic is really loud, you can be like, hang on, would I say this to my friend, or would I say this to my sibling? Like, would I be this mean? Would I be this like vociferously horrible to someone I loved? No. Okay, so why am I talking like that to myself? Like, just start challenging things. It can be annoying, because I'm also going to say, like, you might notice that people around you are constantly putting themselves down in little ways. So they might say like, oh, I'm such an idiot, I forgot to do this thing, or oh, why am I like this? Like, I can't believe I forgot this, I'm so silly, beating themselves up. And it's a small thing, and you can, if you want, challenge them on that and be like, hey, no, don't say that about yourself, you're great, like, you just made a mistake. That's, everyone does that, like, you know, everyone, you know, misplaces their keys. There's no need to be so like, oh, I'm so silly. You may feel comfortable like bringing that up with people, or you can just like notice it, like just get into the habit of noticing this and be like, oh, okay, I don't have to be like that. And that's not to say that you're like better than other people because you're like, oh, I'm challenging my negative thoughts, those people are like talking badly about themselves. No, we're about like noticing this stuff, because once you've built an awareness of it, you can then start to change it and to challenge the thoughts. Like we're saying, you might not be saying stuff out loud of like, oh, why did I do that? I can't believe I made this decision, I can't trust myself. If you say stuff like that, it may be in your head. So try and observe your inner monologue and what's going on. So mindfulness is really helpful with this. You're not like engaging emotionally with any of the thoughts. You're just like noticing them, being like, I'm being really mean to myself right now. Interesting. Like, there's no emotional connection to it. You're not getting involved. You're just observing. But you may also be saying that stuff out loud, being like, I can't make decisions, you know, I'm not good at this, blah, blah, blah. If you're saying that stuff, you're subconsciously like affirming it to yourself, because your brain doesn't want to be wrong. So if you're saying like, I'm bad at making decisions, it can bring to mind loads of examples of times where you made bad decisions. Like, there will be plenty of evidence there. But if you flipped it and were like, I made the best decision I could at the time, or I generally make good decisions, then your brain can bring to mind all of the times where you've made good decisions. It's quite annoying, but there will be both, right? You will have made some questionable decisions, you will also have made some good decisions. So it's like, what story do you want to perpetuate? What do you want going forward? Do you want to continue to make bad decisions to remind yourself of, oh, that time I made this questionable decision, or I should have done something else? Or do you want to choose instead to have a more of a positive outlook on it, or to at least give yourself space to grow, as opposed to being stuck in like, I make questionable decisions? So this is where affirmations can be really helpful in terms of like this self-love reset. And they're a bit dicey, because if you feel really badly about yourself, and I've experienced this, when you start trying to tell yourself an affirmation of I am enough, or I am worthy, or like I am beautiful, if you don't believe that, and you really don't believe it, you're just giving more fuel to your inner critic then. Because you're saying to yourself, I am beautiful, and you're trying to like affirm that to yourself through this repeated affirmation. But the voice in your head is going, you're not beautiful. Like, how vain are you to say that you're beautiful? Why do you think you're beautiful? Like, it can backfire if you're not careful. So if any of these affirmations, we're going to go through some, if any of them you are resistant to and are like, no, that is a sign of like, don't do this yet. Like, you're not ready for this step yet, because you don't want to be inadvertently giving yourself more ammunition to hate yourself by trying to tell yourself, I'm beautiful, which you are. But if you don't believe it yet about yourself, you're just going to give more fuel to that voice in your head to be horrible to you, which we're trying to stop. So then you might end up in like a vicious circle of like trying to be better using affirmations, but then it's like actually detrimental, because it's just making yourself beat yourself up more. So if that is the case, pause on these. But you can find ones or create your own ones that are sort of in the middle ground. So using the list of qualities that you like about yourself, you could turn those into affirmations. So you could be like, I am thoughtful. And then you can pause and be like, do I have any resistance to that? And hopefully not, because you wrote it down on a list of qualities that you admire about yourself, or that you've noticed in yourself, or maybe even the list that other people have said about you. You should be, when you're saying like, I am thoughtful, there should be like plenty of things you can bring to mind, like I sent this person a birthday card, or I often get thoughtful gifts for people, or I consider other people's feelings. That can be its own can of worms, and I've got like a people pleasing video coming out soon, so don't consider other people's feelings too much, but it's good to be considerate. You just don't have to like make all of your decisions based solely around their feelings and not around your own. They don't have to be like absolute things like that, like I am thoughtful or I am caring or I am beautiful. It can be ones like we talked about in terms of like I'm working on my decision making, or I generally make good decisions. Like if it helps you to add like qualifiers like generally or most of the time, add those things, because you're still saying something positive and hopefully like reminding yourself of all the times where you did make good decisions. Yes, you might be saying I generally make good decisions, which is implying that sometimes you don't, but you're not phrasing it in the negative way of I don't make good decisions less often than I make bad decisions. Do you see what I mean? You're phrasing it still in a positive way that's going to help remind you of the fact that you have made good decisions in the past. Another one could be like I'm always learning, or I'm growing, or I'm trying my best. So that allows you space for like, yes, I do make mistakes, but it's not making you acknowledge that in the affirmation, if that makes sense. Like you're not having to outright say I make mistakes but I'm trying my best. If that is helpful for you to say, great, but generally I find it helpful to say like only positive things in the affirmations, because you want to like affirm these things to yourself, so you don't want to be affirming anything negative. It's kind of similar to like scripting in that you want to be focusing on the good things. So you're not saying like I don't sleep in anymore, but you're saying like I wake up early. They're essentially saying the same thing, but it's a different framing, and it helps to, especially if you're someone who's like critical of yourself, it helps to train you to focus on the positive. And there will be some positives, and even if you don't want to do positives about you in terms of like I am thoughtful or I am beautiful in terms of you can still do affirmations about positive feelings like I am blessed or I am grateful. Those are good ones, because like regardless of the situation, regardless of the self-love that you're building and how you're trying to change your relationship to the way you feel about your body, you can still be like I am grateful. Like in any situation I can find something to be grateful for. So I'm grateful is a good one to affirm to yourself, because not only do you have a lot to be grateful for, but it's not gonna hopefully it's not going to inspire any like negative self-critical feelings. Gratitude is so important. I've done several videos about it because it is a really life-changing thing, and I would urge you to start doing a daily gratitude list, because it's a really small thing that has a really big impact, like a disproportionate impact. Write a gratitude list for a couple of minutes, or even just write down like 5 things. Just have a think and be like 5 things I'm grateful for today, and do that every day. And within a month you will notice that something in your mindset and the way that you look at the world, something has shifted. Like gratitude is incredibly powerful, and that's why I think I am grateful is such a powerful affirmation. But obviously, again, with the caveat of if you're saying to yourself I am grateful, but there's a voice in your head being like I'm not grateful, and pointing out all of the bad things about whatever situation, all of the things that you don't like about yourself or whatever, then that is not a helpful affirmation. So there's some discernment that goes into this, but it's all a process and you will learn more as you go. So we've talked about both some practical things and also some mindset shifts, and just little things that you can start to incorporate to start changing your mindset, challenging your negative beliefs. But I wanted to spend some time maybe reflecting on how you got to this point. So for me, that involved looking back at how I gained weight in my early 20s, partly because of my addiction and drinking so much, and also eating a lot and not making the best food choices, junk food basically. I know it's not necessarily good to label food as good or bad or as like junk food, but you know what I mean, like crisps and ice cream, things that are great to enjoy, and I still love those things, but it's good to eat those things in moderation as opposed to them making up like the majority of your diet. Sort of going off of what we've been talking about so far in terms of trying to be more positive, or like speaking positive, kind things into your life through your affirmations and through challenging your negative thoughts and your negative beliefs about yourself. Along those lines is to try and have compassion for your past self. So you may be now, like I can sometimes look in the mirror and feel really sad about the way I look. I've now reached more of a point with of acceptance with it. But I will say as well, acceptance is a daily practice. So there are some days where it doesn't bother me and I'm like, yes, I love and accept myself. And even just like me being able to say that and actually mean it, that brings me such a feeling of peace. And that's the point with affirmations, is to connect whatever you're saying with like a feeling. It becomes true and you really start to feel it. And some days that's great, but other days I can struggle a bit with that acceptance, and there maybe is some resistance there. And I think most of the time that's quite normal for things to fluctuate. Generally, if your acceptance and your self-love is going up, even if there are like ups and downs, if the graph is trending upwards, I think that's a good thing. But it can be helpful if you're struggling as well with the affirmations, like for the reasons we talked about earlier. It can also be helpful to reflect on how you got to this point, not to like beat yourself up, but to be able to have compassion for your past self. I look at how I look today and I'm like, oh, this is a culmination of all sorts of things. And some of those things can be, good things, positive things, like happy memories. When you spend a lot of time with family and you just sat around a table together eating all the time, it might be normal to gain weight. But if this is something that you didn't want or it's come around because of your behaviors with food. I've struggled with certain things. It's very normal if you have been through like a substance abuse thing to also have problems with food, because it's all about the way that you're trying to deal with external things to actually cope with your feelings. Trying to understand all of that and be compassionate and be like, okay, there are all kinds of reasons why you are the way you are now, even if it's not necessarily the way you like to be. And we talked about how you can still change yourself. You know, you might be like, oh, I wish I was stronger, so I'm gonna like lift weights. You can still like do that whilst accepting yourself, as long as you're not doing it from this place of hatred. So I think understanding how you got to this point, how you got to this like hatred of your body, where that came from. So for me, I put on a lot of weight and now I feel quite strange. Like I feel, especially since I got sober, like I feel this is a new thing that I have to navigate. Like I don't feel like myself basically, and I'm every day learning, oh no, this is who I am now, and being okay with that. So it's not necessarily like you gained a bunch of weight and now you hate your body. That is what it was like for me, and now it is not like that. Thankfully, I don't stare at the mirror and hate myself in the way that I used to, but it could just be like any kind of change. Or because we live in a society that is very harsh on women, saying that you're always not good enough, or, you know, we get so many like messages, whether it's through advertising or through what we're watching, in terms of like these beautiful actresses with their hair always really nicely done. The standards that we're seeing and portrayed as like just every day, you know, this person is just like going into work in their TV show, but they look like stunning. And not that you can't be that, and there's nothing wrong with being that, but it's okay if you feel like that is an impossible thing to live up to. Understanding all of that, like understanding how did you get to this point where you are hating yourself and not enjoying being in the body you're in now. I said my reasons. That can help you build some compassion and be kind to yourself, which can then help with all of the other things we've been talking about so far. It's not necessarily going to be straightforward or easy, but if you're watching a video like this and you're interested in this topic, that shows that maybe you are ready to do some of the work, so some of the stuff that we talked about. So you could also share your story, like either as a video that you're going to publish or just like talk it out. I probably prefer expressing myself through writing, so it's helpful to type something like this, or you could write in your journal, or you could do something like this and sit down in front of your phone or your camera and just talk about like how you got to this point. Some useful questions to ask yourself is like, when did this start? What do you think the influences are that are making you sit and hate yourself now? How did you get to this point? If it's something that either happened to you or something that you've absorbed from culture, what do you think is the easiest thing for you to do going forward? We're going to go into some more practical things. Actually, let's go into them now because that links quite well. So you could pick one of the things from the list I'm about to say. What is the easiest thing for you to start with? So some of the things you could do: don't hide from your body. And that's such a weird thing, but I mean like when you get out of the bath or the shower, don't avert your gaze or try and get dressed as quickly as possible and not like look at yourself. I'm reading this book, and one of the things she talks about, I mean this is obviously about money, but actually she talks a lot about manifestation, being in alignment, acting as if you already have the thing even if you don't. So she's talking about like a wealth mindset even if you don't have money at all. It's fascinating, highly recommend. But in the same way she's talking about how do you expect to like earn loads of money or be good with your money if you're like scared to check your bank account. The same thing applies with how do you expect to like love or accept your body if you're scared to like look in the mirror and you just want to like get dressed as quickly as possible. Sometimes it can also be helpful to not focus too much on the way you look, but instead trying to connect with the way you feel, trying to build self-love and build acceptance for yourself and the way you look now. Focusing on the feeling as opposed to like what you actually look like. So some of the things that I'm going to say are about the way you look and, you know, wearing nice clothes or whatever, that can help you feel good. But I think also just focusing on the things that bring you joy, the things that make you feel really light, whether it's like going for a walk in the evening and looking at the clouds go silver, whether you really love reading or you're really into plants and you have like a beautiful garden or a vegetable garden or whatever. Trying to connect with the feeling of like who you are and when you feel the most light. One really easy way to do this I find is to put on some of your favorite music and put that on really loud and just dance around for like 10 minutes. Or 5 minutes. You could put a timer on if you want, or you could just be like, I'm gonna listen to this song 3 times. At first, it might feel weird and you might feel silly. In this book, she talks about, do you want to be cool or do you want to be rich? She's saying like sometimes you have to be cringe in order to be salesy and make money. And I think the same thing kind of applies here. It's like, do you want to be cool, or are you happy to like look silly or to feel a bit silly at the beginning of this in order to build that self-acceptance? Not to say that you have to, like there's plenty of other things, but it may feel a bit uncomfortable at first. I'm not even saying that it will, but you might put the music on and be like, what am I doing, like dancing? I feel really self-conscious. But the more you do this, say you do that every day, for example, for like a week, by the end, you'll not be feeling self-conscious at all. You'll just be like, oh yeah, I love this song, I love dancing, and you're not being self-conscious about it. Aside from that feeling, I mentioned like clothes. I did a whole video about buying new clothes when you want to lose weight. So this can be maybe something that you relate to. I held myself back from buying new clothes for so long because, well, one, I didn't have a job, so I didn't have like loads of disposable income to spend on clothes. But also I was like, oh, but if I lose weight, then none of those clothes will fit me, so I'm not gonna buy clothes. And it wasn't like I was actively trying to lose weight. It wasn't like I had a plan to lose weight, because I guess maybe that would be slightly different. But it was more just sort of like this overhanging fear that if I bought clothes and then lost weight, I wouldn't be able to fit into them and it would have been a waste of money, which like may be true, but what it meant was that I didn't really have any clothes that made me feel really good in myself because I'd put on weight in my addiction. Give yourself permission to do both, like we said. So if you are like, oh, but I want to change the way I look, and you're worried, it doesn't even have to be about losing weight, right? Maybe you're trying to like build up your back or your arm muscles and you're like, well, if I buy this like nice jacket, that might not fit in 6 months because I'll be like lifting loads, which is fair enough. But there are ways to find things that make you feel really good when you wear them, whilst also not like spending all of your money on it. So like this jumper, for example, is a lovely green jumper. I got it from Depop. So an option is to buy secondhand. I would not say Depop, I don't recommend it. I've had some bad experiences. This is not a bad experience. I like this jumper, but I would definitely recommend Vinted. I found some great things on there and the prices are generally really, really good because people are just trying to like get rid of their stuff. So buy things secondhand. That would be an obvious thing. Again, focus on what makes you feel good. So stop like thinking, what will I do if this happens, or what if this is a waste? What if you buy something and it just makes you feel really good about yourself? That's all that matters. That's not to say either that you should be spending loads of money frivolously buying things, but if you are like, I want to buy some new trousers that fit nicely, or secondhand stuff, anything that helps you feel good. Similarly, in terms of feeling good, having some kind of morning routine or evening routine, or both. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. It can just be like a small sequence, like you brush your teeth, then you read for 20 minutes, then you go to bed. Like it doesn't have to be a long drawn out process that you need so much time to prepare for, or that you have all these fancy products or whatever. If you want to include those things, brilliant, but it doesn't have to be like an aesthetic morning routine. You can just be like, okay, I want to wake up and meditate for a little bit or pray for a bit, not immediately rush into the day. Then maybe you want to go for a walk and then you want to have a shower. Try and have a routine that you stick to, because this will give you so much in terms of you'll not only feel productive because you're like, oh, I stuck to my routine, but it's also just like setting you up for the day so you can have a good day, because you're like, oh, I had that time in the morning to myself to just chill, and then I got into work and got into the day and got things going, and it builds self-esteem in that way. I actually did a whole video about 11 habits to build your self-esteem, so I will link that if you want to check that out, because that is another way that you're gonna build some self-love. And maybe as part of your routine you can be like, oh, I put on my jewelry every morning, or I do my hair really nicely every morning, or you put on a little bit of makeup if you want. You don't have to, but if you want. With stuff like makeup, I know some people do like to put it on every day, it makes them feel better, but I mean, I'm not wearing it now, as you can see. I'm trying to like normalize that for myself. This is the acceptance we talked about. I'm like, okay, this is what I look like. I can look really nice and look polished or put together if I'm wearing makeup, and that's great. And for certain situations, it gives me some confidence. It's also fine if this is the way I want to show up as well. And I'm trying to like normalize that for myself. Be mindful as you try these things and think like, am I doing this because I want other people to perceive me a certain way? Or am I doing this because I really feel like I want to do this? Like some days I'm just like, yeah, I want to wear some makeup because I like wearing lipstick, or I like wearing blush, or particularly I like wearing like different colour eyeshadow, right? Like, and that's really fun and creative to do. So that's like connected to the feeling of like what it is to be me, what it is to walk around. So similarly, think about why you're doing all of these things. I know I'm like throwing lots of stuff out there, but I hope that this is encouraging you to be a bit reflective, and most importantly, to be kind to yourself about all of these things, because there's so much that comes together. There's also so much we can do, even small things, and all about the little things. So if you want to like incorporate into your morning routine, I put some jewelry on, like put on some nice earrings, or put on a nice necklace, or your rings, or whatever. It's just small things that can give you a little bit of a boost. If you want to wear perfume every day, I put on some perfume earlier and I was like, yes, this feels like such a luxury. It doesn't even have to be like a fancy perfume, just like a body spray or something nice. If that helps you feel good about yourself or feel put together, it's all about the feeling of what that is. And it's about acting from a place of love and care for yourself as opposed to hating yourself. I thought I'd unpacked all of my self-loathing, but turns out there's quite a lot under the surface. Not necessarily to do with my body and the way I look, but just other things. So this is definitely a process and things will keep coming up, particularly if you do some shadow work. And we talked about the negative core beliefs. If you start looking at those things and like trying to unpick where did they come from, who told me this, or like what messages have I picked up from just being a person in the world, there is quite a lot. And on the surface you may be like, yes, I'm ready to do affirmations, or I'm ready to be grateful, I'm ready to accept myself, but there might still be some things under the surface, like some really horrible thoughts about yourself that will come out sort of out of nowhere. So I'm not saying that to scare you or be like, you're not working hard enough. That's probably what I would think if I was hearing that. It's more just like, everything is fine, like everything is okay, whatever you're doing is okay. And if you have a not so good day, that's fine. And the next day, if it's also not good, fine. But like at some point, when you start to feel better, or when you feel more able to do some of the things we've talked about, if you just start with little things, making a little gratitude list, putting on your jewelry in the morning, building this foundation of acceptance and care for yourself, building this foundation so that then you can start doing all of the other big things like challenging your thoughts and everything. It's a process, and wherever you're at right now, you are in the perfect place to start. You can revisit this video at any time, move on to the next step, try something that you weren't ready to try before. I really hope some of the suggestions here help you. Again, take what helps you, and if something doesn't resonate, or if you're not ready to like do those affirmations or whatever, leave them and come back to them. It is a really life-changing thing if you start building this acceptance of your body, acceptance of yourself, and building this self-love. And I hope this video has been a great starting point for you to be able to do that. I will leave a video on the screen that the algorithm thinks is good for you. I will also leave a video about gratitude, because we talked there about how important gratitude is. It is so important, so check that out if you want to learn more about this life-changing practice. God bless. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.